What a special place to grow up in.
When I reflect back on why I stayed in Easton as long as I did, I think it was because there's something that keeps you here.
Is it me, or was it just an unbelievable time to grow up? I mean, did that city not sparkle? Or was that a child's eyes?
Everyone has his or her own sense of what the word home means. But for people in Easton, Pennsylvania, home has a special music, a set of memories, and a magic all its own. In a dot-com world, Easton is bedrock, where the old-fashioned values, loyalty, honesty, and respect still mean something. Family ties still matter. And laughter is always the best medicine. Easton was more than a melting pot. It was a rich tapestry of ethnicity.
We had a very, very mixed community at 12th and 13th and Lehigh Streets. We had every bit of different ethnicity that you could possibly think of in that area of town, and this would be back in 25, 26, 27.
Well, when I first arrived, I liked the community very well, and I saw an opportunity for my children, because the mother said she did not want to raise children in New York. So therefore I had to make the move, because I did not want to go back to Georgia.
We were immigrant children. That sort of set you apart for a while. But as we grew older, we just got into the mainstream of society, and it wasn't a problem.
We had almost every ethnic background that lived in a 4 or 5 block radius. And I don't think anyone ever had a key to their own home.
Of course, when we first moved here, we didn't even have a key to the door. We'd go to New York and stay a week, and then lock the house up, and we came back, well, just like we left it.
At the heart of what it meant to grow up in Easton was the neighborhood. From West Ward to South Side, from downtown to College Hill, the city was the sum of its parts, each with its own character and richness.
None of us were raised by our own parents. We were raised by our neighborhoods. And when we went out to play, we all had 10 parents. And it could have been Mrs. Troop or Mrs. Davison or Mrs. Danachek that came out and said, it's cold, get your sweater. We all were listening to Mom, and we all went and got the sweater. Whose mom it was didn't matter, it was our mom.
We lived on College Hill at the corner of McCartney and Lafayette Streets. There was a half a vacant block behind us, which served as a playground for the kids. It was a drawing card and a wonderful time for children. And their March school was close. They could walk, and their friends were all there.
We had no playground, so we played in the streets. We played there and had to move when the horses went by with our deliveries, and the Iceman went by with his horse and buggy.
There was nothing that we could do that somebody else didn't know about, and you had to be prepared. If you did something wrong 2 or 3 blocks from home, by the time you got home and crossed the threshold, the phone call had been made and you were in trouble.
Nobody had air conditioning, so in the summer, people were arguing or screaming or yelling or trying to kill each other. You were aware of it. You were aware of their problems because your windows were open too. But it was a great way to grow up.
Remember, this was a wonderful era in that there were still porches. This was before air conditioning ruined the country, and people had to go out and talk to each other. And in Easton, this was a way of life.
It didn't matter whether your mother was cooking dinner for her 7. She may have had 3 or 4 or 5 other kids, or one of us may have been across the street at that home, or would have been down the street at another home.
And where I grew up, we used to shop for dinner. You didn't like what you were having, you went and
sure.
Yeah.
There was always somebody in my house.
Yeah.
I didn't shop too much. My mom could cook. But a lot of people
Everyone
came to my
shopped
house.
at your house.
Yeah.
When young men lost their lives overseas, the entire community felt the loss.
Not all of the boys returned from the war. We lost a few Lebanese boys, and of course the parents were just devastated. And we also lost, I say we because Jimmy Noble was an Italian boy, but he was part of our community also.
And when victories were won, the entire community joined the celebration.
VE Day and VJ Day. They were both in 45. I think it was VE Day was in May and VJ Day was in August. We marched in the streets when we heard the news, and it was very good for us as kids because we had a lot of energy to vent in those days, and we were very, very happy that the war was over, everyone was coming back. But we snaked through the streets. We just snaked through the streets for hours on end.
Well, when I first came into the community, the black people couldn't get a job. And that I was more interested in they getting a job. Like, they couldn't even work at Mid-Ed. Mid-Ed had about almost 4,000 people working for them, but no blacks. So put blacks on that because I told them blacks use electricity. And we got to use electricity, we want some money back in our community. So they started hiring black people.
Out of 5 children, 4 finished college. And at the time, my husband was working at the foundry, and he was laid off more than he was working. But we made it. It was a scuffle. We made it.
Somewhere in the mid-60s with the Vietnam War and the things that were happening out with the demonstrations out west start touching home, and things started to change quite dramatically.
I thought it took a little time for the social and political upheaval of the 60s to reach Easton, though. I know when I went away to college, it was almost culture shock. I went to Providence College. I get into New England, and they were light years ahead of us. People are demonstrating against the war. Hair was down. Guys had hair down to their shoulders, and combat jackets and peace. I'm walking around wondering what is this? You know, it was vastly different for me. So it was like day and night. And there was a while where I would actually come home. My father was a barber. First thing he'd do was cut my hair, because I would let it grow. I'd come home. This had to go. He'd cut my hair off. So I thought it took a little longer for all of that stuff to hit Easton, and really.
My husband ended up going to Vietnam in '70. We got married, and he got orders to go about a month after we got married.
There we were, going to dances, going to sporting events, cheering, having a good time, parties, and then all of a sudden, all these young men that I graduated with, we were 17 years old, turning 18, and I'm still having a great time. All summer long, I'm going to the shore every weekend, never missing, and they're going off to war.
First grade teacher, I remember her so well, and how kind she was and how she treated us. Second grade teacher was the same. Third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, they all remained a part of my life, the rest of my life.
Asa Packer was a community school, which was right down the street from us. And we didn't have a PTA. So a couple of friends of mine and I decided that we would like to organize one. So we did. We organized the PTA, and it's still, Asa Packer burned down, but the PTA is still in service with the other elementary school.
In home economics, they learned things about the home, how to cook different things. And the students were very interested. Some of them were from my Future Nurse Club, and they went on to become nurses.
That school was built for about 1,000 students, and when they consolidated the junior high schools, they had about 2,000 in there. And the result was you had a lot of classes with 34, 35 people in one class instead of the nice classes I had at Marsh, and it was difficult.
One of the first days we were here, in what was 8th grade for me, the principal called the entire class in, maybe 800 of us or so. We filled the auditorium. One of the young gentlemen in the class, who shall remain nameless, I think, for now, somehow had gotten the bowling ball into the room and rolled that down the then concrete floor of the auditorium. And that set the tone for what I can only tell you was an interesting year.
I had a lot of great teachers, both in Martins Creek in elementary school. I remember some of them, and certainly in Easton High School. And if I think of one of the guys who stands out on my mind, it's Phil Spaziani. Phil was a teacher of mine in junior high school and then later in high school, and was just an outstanding educator and the kind of guy who really took an interest in the students, made sure that people really understood the concepts, went out of the way to try to teach the subject matter, and more importantly, was just a good human being. I mean, he really cared about the kids.
I loved wrestling, I love track, I love all sports, but the heart and soul of education is teaching and teachers, and I loved it.
I've had some amazing classes, and the students who've passed through Easton High School, so they're all over the place. Writers, artists, scientists, doctors. They were formed by their experiences here in Easton, both in the neighborhoods and in the schools.
Well, I think you missed probably the #1 graduate Easton High School in the news organization.
Tom Curley. John Curley.
He's not only the CEO, but also chairman of the board. And his brother is the head of USA Today.
I think one other person helped both John Curley and myself, and that was Parnell Lewis. Parnell and my mother went to Easton together, and Parnell, of course, was running the Easton Express, and he helped John get a job initially, and then eventually I wrote my first story for the Easton Express, and the doors opened, and we fell in love with journalism.
I think it also shows how much the community means to the people when you look at how many people really returned, like, as teachers after graduating from Easton. My coaches,
It's a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah, they all come back to, like, you know, give what they can back to the kids.
We had the opportunity as young people to do things for ourselves. So we'd meet in the backyard, and there would be 8 boys who would figure out what game do we want to play, what will the rules be, how long will it go on, when do we change sides because one team's better than another, etc. What I'm talking about is children developing leadership on their own.
There were 10 or 12 elementary schools in Easton, and every one of those schools had a summer playground. I lived my whole summers over at Vanderveer Playground, where Pat Fisher was a director along with Anthony Terranova. It was just a setting for the development of youth, athletic and camaraderie and good sportsmanship and understanding and community that I think fostered everything that I ever developed into.
In the playground league, which didn't compete in the evening with the older guys. Right. And we, from with Taylor School, had the team used to compete against one of the West Ford schools. I think it was Vanderveer. And your brothers used to play. And sometimes I don't know if it was basketball or football, because there were a lot of guys on the ground.
When I played, I practiced with Jim Gannot, and you mentioned Terry Bartlett and Bill Houston, who's terrific player and athlete here at Easton. I practiced with them, but I wasn't old enough to play with them.
Those guys played so hard, and man, you just wanted to get picked, you know, and get in the game. And then we would play tackle football, actually, right by 22. And on Saturdays, these guys were wacky, the older guys. The little guys would play, and then they would have a draft. And if you were good enough, you could play in the Sunday game with the big guys and get killed.
So athletic competition, as a fact of life, began on the sandlots and the playgrounds and culminated every year in the Easton PA game on Thanksgiving Day.
After I graduated from Easton, I went to Lafayette, and the first thing I couldn't wait to do in September, the first thing I wanted to do was take my newfound New York City friends and roommates at Lafayette to an Easton High football game, because I knew that they'd never seen anything like that coming from New York City. And I brought them out here to Cottingham Stadium on a Friday night, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 people, and they just couldn't believe it.
I still take great pride in my daddy being a football captain for Easton. I take great pride when he was elected to the all-century team or whatever. My goodness, that made my boyhood realities come to life again.
Easton won, and Easton teams won, and you were expected to win.
When I was a small boy and again getting started in wrestling, my dad was a big fan of wrestling. I didn't have idols that were in the NFL or Major League Baseball. My idols were here every Wednesday and Saturday night.
My physical education teacher at Easton when I was there was Mac Richardson. She's a legend here too, and she really got me involved in, and at that time it was just girls basketball.
But we tried to cheer every sport we could, and we did. We cheered wrestling, we cheered football, we cheered soccer, we cheered girls field hockey, and for a while we even cheered at swimming matches.
There are a lot of things that are the same. The level, the stunting is different, but still the importance of the Thanksgiving Day game and supporting your team and being from Easton, all of that is still there. It's just amazing.
Well, I used to live in Peaburg. Shame on me. And my dad played football for Peaburg and he wrestled for Peaburg, so it's interesting. Every Thanksgiving he gets out that old leather jacket and just puts up pictures of Susie Stateliner all over the house. And
Easton was a melting pot, but yet we had one thing in common, and I'll be honest with you, that was the tradition of Easton football and Easton athletics and the concept of being a Red Rover.
Don't ever give up. That you know, right? That's number one. Never give up. Work harder than the next guy, and you'll be better than the next guy. So hard work and never give up. Thanks.
Our coaches at that time were men of high quality and integrity. And that integrity they passed on to us as far as being fair and honest and being sincere in all your relationship with people. They guided us as we went through life.
Bob Rube was really a no-nonsense coach. I mean, there was a lot of conditioning, a lot of straightforward stuff, a great deal of discipline, a lot of time devoted, and a lot of focus on the game itself.
The roughest part about playing football at Easton High School was practice. If you missed a day of practice or you got detention in school or something like that, you had one of two things could happen. One, you had to run the ropes, which will kill you. Or number two, you got demoted to the third string and you might not see daylight again.
You mentioned Pete Carrill's name, and that's, you know, he's a legend in itself. Next to my father, he's had the greatest impact on my life.
My father was the basketball coach, and
my coach.
in 1 year they put in a stupid rule that the coaches could not. They couldn't get off the benches, not at all. And my father had a tendency to sort of go down on his haunches, like he really wasn't jumping up to yell at the referees, but that was just his style. So they kept calling technical fouls on him. So the players were so tired of getting these technical fouls that they hooked up a seatbelt to the bleachers, and they actually hooked my father in the seatbelt, and that's where he stayed.
and to be under the auspices of Mr. Rude and Mr. Everett and Ms. Sheets, and they guided us into being the best that we could be. And it gave us two things. It gave us respect for authority, and it gave us an understanding that whatever we did wrong, there were going to be consequences. And we realized that. But we also understood that when we did things well, there would be rewards.
I was coached by Bob Root, who was a fantastic individual. I was coached by an Eddie Snyder who believed in discipline, and I think that carried on in my life.
Growing up, the coach you always heard about at Easton High School was Eddie Snyder, and he was a guy who was a real detailed guy. He worked you hard. He made you appreciate the little things, the intricacies of the game, and to learn the game.
I happen to be a tennis player. I remember the day that Brad Flagg, who was a tennis coach, and just a wonderful guy and a sweet, gentle man, a real good coach, the kind you hope to get, was after me to change the toss on my serve. I forget what direction anymore. And I kept telling him I wouldn't have control. I reared back and did it his way and bounced my hardest serve right off of his head, knocking him down, knocking his glasses off. I thought I'd killed him and my career was done forever.
All of them gave something back to the kids in addition to coaching football, basketball, wrestling, baseball, whatever it has to be. They all were there in some capacity, whether it was to serve perhaps as a second father, or to serve as a big brother, or just to give some advice to someone on a topic other than sports.
1,000 points right here. 1,061. Farmer, my senior. Rapid.
I still love the community. People are nice. They're friendly, they're neighborly, and they care about each other.
I have lived literally in Boston for 30 years. If anybody asks me where I'm from, I say I'm from Easton, Pennsylvania.
As much as I love to come home, it's fun to bring people in who really didn't get to grow up in a town with a lot of character, really. Again, that I would have taken for granted, I'm sure, was I not seeing it through other people's eyes.
You know, Easton is a unique place. I came here almost 30-some years ago and sort of fell in love with the place, and wonderful people, great place to raise a family. This school is marvelous, wonderful kids. I wouldn't want to work anywhere else.
A lot of small towns are very provincial and do not get people involved, and there are people involved in every aspect of this community that are exciting people, very bright people, good people.
It's really just a sense of pride and a sense of family here. It's like you belong here.
The traditions just run so deeply in this community. You never really leave it.
I think there's really very few places in America that really have what we have here in this area. I just want to kind of keep it alive, do my part to keep it alive.
The relationships and the things that you develop, the interpersonal relationships, are incredible. They're very strong. The ties are unbelievably strong, and you can't outgrow it.
It's nice to have a great economy. It's nice to have the best schools. Sometimes these are outgrowths, but it starts with people who can talk to each other, no matter where they come from or what their background is. You've just got to be able to work together. That's what you learn, and that's what was ingrained in Easton, and that's what I haven't seen in so many other places.
For all of them, Easton, in its magical simplicity, is still the place they call home.
It was perfect.
It's just been a great place to live.
We could say the USA begins here.
People care for each other. And that's what communities are about.